Hello guys, welcome to what is sadly the final Russian Football News Predictions League preview of the first half of the season. We're going into round 20, only 10 games left after this, but more importantly we've got the 3-month winter break coming up, so it's going to be the last predictions you're going to have to make for quite some time now. So a couple of little things I'd like to mention at this point. Firstly, thanks for joining us so far this season. If you've joined the game for new or if you're continuing from last season, really appreciate the support. Secondly, and equally importantly, don't forget that we will be running another Predictions Cup, but this time, more interestingly, for money. So we will put out a post over the winter break and we'll remind you in plenty of time. But the basic idea is put in €5 to enter, or £5 depending on where your currency is. And if we get enough people, then we will have at least 2 cash prize winners. If we have up to 32 people, then we'll have 4 cash prize winners. It's really that simple. You do exactly the same as you already do. You just pay in a little bit of money to enter the Predictions Cup and you could win some money back. Anyhow, more of that later. For now, guys, let's crack on with the last domestic round of the first half of the season. Now, on Friday night, first up, I'll be going to Yekaterinburg, the last road trip until March, for Ural against Arsenal Tula. Now, one little side note, as of course you've noticed if you followed Russian football the last few weeks, a lot has been made about the freezing cold conditions of some of the further east venues. Khabarovsk has come under heavy fire from Lokomotiv Moscow, even though they did go there and get the win in the end. Now, Yekaterinburg, I assure you, it was freezing cold last time, 2 weeks ago. And there is a very real possibility they will play at the indoor arena, which is right next to the SKB Bank Arena. So they've already had discussions with the RFPL, and it's just a matter of the 2 clubs agreeing. So depending on the temperatures on the day, it will either be indoors, which is only 3,500 capacity. To be honest, I'd be surprised if they get that many people anyway. So that might have a little bearing on the actual game itself. But in terms of the availability of players, Gregor Balajic is a very heavy doubt for Ural. Gia Grigolava is suspended for Arsenal Tula. But so is Vladimir Ilyin for Ural. Eric Bukfalvi is also a doubt, and that would be a massive blow to the hosts. However, let's just have a quick look back at last week. Now, we had, Arsenal Tula lost to a very late Denis Glushikov goal. Slightly harshly done by there, because they're a very good home record, Arsenal Tula. But they did lose 1-0. Ural put up a very spirited performance away to Zenit. They were drawing 1-1 until Alexander Kokorin's relatively late winner. But in the end, it was just about deserved, you'd have to say. So they both lost. For Ural, that's now their 3rd defeat in a row, and they are now actually just in the bottom half of the table. Arsenal Tula level on points, so whoever wins this is guaranteed to be top half going into the spring. I'm going to back Ural here, and again, I know a lot of you will think I'm being slightly biased, but they have only lost once all season at home, only conceded 9, which is pretty impressive. I think they have enough. So it's not going to be flashy. I'm just going to go for a relatively unenterprising 1-0 win to Ural. That took slightly longer for the first match than I had planned. But anyhow, let's move on. Dynamo Moscow at home to Anzhi Makhachkala. Okay, so last weekend, Dynamo were at home to Rostov. I actually picked this out as a draw, but Dynamo did go into a 2-0 lead at half-time and held on for what was a relatively comfortable win. So, for Dynamo, that was critical, because had they failed to win, they would have dropped into the automatic relegation places. Thanks to Anzhi Makhachkala winning as well. But as it stands, They are only 1 point from automatic safety. That's how tight it is at the bottom. 4 teams from 12th, which is the lowest place of safety, to 15th, the first automatic relegation place, 1 point separating them. So Dinamo, they got their win. But, yeah, like we say, Angie, they also won, and convincingly so. SKA Khabarovsk are really starting to look in trouble now. The one thing they had going for them before was their home form, and even that's slightly dropping. They're certainly conceding goals there. They're playing entertaining football, but on the road they're getting worse and worse and worse. And you'd have to be seriously concerned for their safety now. 9 games played away from home, only 2 goals scored and 18 conceded. So, got to be honest here. It's very hard to see much hope for them. Dinamo v Anji, quite a tough one. But personally, I'm just going to side with the home side here. Dinamo are very good at home. They have a very tight defence. I believe, in fact, they've conceded fewer goals at home than anybody else. They've only let in a total of, 6 goals, and nobody else has conceded fewer. So I'm going to go for Dinamo, and again, I'm only going to go for 1-0. It's very hard to call nowadays because some teams are pulling out higher scoring wins, but I'm going to play safe and go for 1-0. Right. Rubin home to SKA Khabarovsk. Now, Rubin, both teams are on absolutely dreadful form. Khabarovsk, like we just mentioned, and away from home especially. So it's almost doesn't matter who they're playing. If they're playing away, you'd have to back the home side. Rubin Kazan, well, Christ, they've scored, 3 goals in their last 10 league games, I believe it is. 2 goals in the last 11 league games. That is absolutely horrific. They have Sardar Azmoun, who really was the one they were looking to take over the mantle from Jonatas when they sold the big Brazilian to Hanover back in August. But he's gone over 1,000 Premier League minutes without scoring, and that's just dreadful, regardless of how many stop-start appearances you have. However, they are playing SKA Khabarovsk. You cannot get much lower on confidence than them. They are, at the moment, already 7 points behind possible safety. So Rubin themselves, though, they're on 20 points. They're level with Tosno. And Tosno are in the relegation playoff zone. Considering the money that Rubin have spent in recent transfer windows, that's appalling. But just simply for the opposition, for that alone, I believe they will finally get a win. They haven't won for ages and ages. I'm going to go for 2-0. SKA just have the leakest defence away from home, so that's pretty much how I see that one going. Okay. Next up we have, on Sunday, Amkar PM at home to Krasnodar. Now, Amkar, well, they're just such a dislikable team. They really, really are. I just don't really see what they bring in value to the Russian Football Premier League. And last weekend, desperately dull 0-0 draw at half-time. Thankfully, Ufa went on to win 3-0, which was their biggest home win of the season. Amkar down in 11th. They're only 2 points off the relegation zone. I think most people are hoping they'll go down for the drop. Krasnodar, they have started to pick up a little bit more form. They were 2-0 down at home to Akhmat Grozny, but came back with a really spirited performance to come back and win in injury time. That actually included a missed penalty in there, but Smolov yet again scored. He's on 10 for the season, top scorer joint with Alexander Kokorin. So you'd have to back Krasnodar, really. It's unlikely to be a high-scoring game. Amkar PM is a cold city. The pitch is dreadful, and players often complain playing there. But Krasnodar, no team has won more away from home than they have. So I'm definitely going for a Krasnodar win here. In terms of scoreline, I'm going to go for 2-0 to Krasnodar. Amkar just never really offer much, and I do think they will be fine. They do have Andreas Granqvist suspended, so that's a minor factor in there. but that's the only significant miss they will have, and they have enough to cover it, I believe. So, moving on Saturday afternoon, we have the big one. Okay, this one, and there's been a lot of controversy about scheduling this right at the end of this part of the season when it's the coldest, but it is the Moscow derby, Spartak against CSKA. Now, I have to be honest, this one it's going to be a fascinating game. They've both won the last 3. Spartak have actually won the last 4 in the league. Spartak have only lost once in the last 19 games in all competitions, and that was in Europe. And they, from what looked like a very, very long way off, only 2 or 3 months ago, they really stormed back into it in the league. They're up to 4th, which is Europa League qualification place, on 34 points, 1 point behind CSKA, who, despite their very shallow squad and a few injury problems this season, are in the Champions League places, 1 point ahead on 35 points. But they have to travel to the Otkritia. Now, if Spartak were to win, that would put them into the Champions League places going into the spring part of the season. Last night, CSKA put up a fantastic performance away to Manchester United in the Champions League. They just couldn't hold out. First half of the game, they gave as good as they got, and this was with Konstantin Kuchayev playing in centre midfield, faced with the likes of Ander Herrera and Paul Pogba. Whatever you may think of those players, they are internationally experienced and fabulously talented players, and Kuchayev held his own. Zagoyev was fantastic going forward. Alexander Golovin composed on the ball. It was a really impressive away performance. They fell to 2 goals, and admittedly that means they're now in Europa League coming into the spring, but they still have European football. Pontus Wernbloom and Bibras Natko were rested for that game. Were both suspended, sorry. But they do have Georgi Milanov, Georgi Chernikov and Alexei Beretsuski all out injured. That's a problem. However, Spartak, Quincy Promes and Zé Luís, they will both be playing tonight in Liverpool in their Champions League game. This is just, in terms of the result, it's too hard for me to call. Really, genuinely is. Of course, it could go either way. It's a derby game. Literally anything could happen. But I'm going to go for a draw. I know it's not desperately satisfying, but I just see this as being a very tightly fought game. So I'm going to go for 1-1. That's the game of the week, without any question. However, other games are just as important for the teams involved. Tosno at home to Lokomotiv Moscow. Pardon me. Well, Lokomotiv just 6 points clear. I mean, of course, if results go their way, they really could end up 9 points clear, which is absolutely mad, going into the last 10 games. I don't expect that quite to happen. But what I do expect, pardon me, I do expect Lokomotiv to put up a pretty solid showing. Tosno, they're in a little bit of freefall at the moment, and they've lost 3 of the last 4, and they've conceded quite a lot of goals. They're starting to leak a lot. I think Lokomotiv are just going to do the job here, really. There's not much more to it. No extra injuries or suspensions for Lokomotiv. Anton Zabolotny, however, is suspended for Tosno. That's a big miss for them. Yes, Yevgeny Markov is their top scorer, but Anton Zabolotny is the one who's been called up for the Russian squad in recent months. So I'm going to go for a 1-0 win to Lokomotiv. Okay, going to have to rattle through the last 2 here. Sorry, I skipped over Rostov against Ufa. Quite frankly, I don't see this being much more than a very dull 0-0. I mean, I'm not going to go into a great deal of detail because there's not much detail to go into. Other than Ufa away from home, they've only won once all season, very tight defence. Rostov equally are struggling quite seriously, so a point would do them both a world of good. So 0-0 is how I see that one finishing. And finally, we have Akhmat Grozny at home to Zenit St. Petersburg. Last weekend, Zenit ground out that win against Ural, and Akhmat had that confidence-crushing defeat in the last minute, having put up a good 2-0 winning performance in the first half. So I do see Zenit continuing with a win here. Scoreline, it's pretty tough. I'm going to go for 2-1 to Zenit. I think there will be goals for both. Guys, Best of luck in the last game of this part of the season, and I will see you soon. Bye-bye.